So I decided to take the I Side with Political quiz. Excuse me. For those that have never taken it, it helps you figure out where you align with those running for president. Um, those that have either announced or strongly suspected to be announcing. Um, it doesn't really help you with anything besides president. I mean, it won't tell you where you stand with your U.S. rep or your state senator, the state senator in Washington, or your local state representative or state rep, or state's attorney, anything like that. Unless one of them's running for president, but besides that, it won't really help you there. Um, it's a good tool. It's a fun quiz. I enjoy discussing politics. I enjoy debating politics. I get really invested in it. So, what I consider fun, I could understand where other people might not. Um, and the good part of it is, you might think you like a politician, a certain one. Maybe they're a member of the party you belong to, or you saw him give a speech, or you saw him write an op-ed, or something along those lines. And you don't know that much about him. This will match up your responses, your stances, and tell you one way or the other. All right, here's where we, stand. So pull it up here. I really hope Hillary don't run again. All right, and as I go along, I will give my reasons for agreeing or disagreeing. I said it's a long quiz. It's very thorough. All right, should the president be able to authorize military force against Al Qaeda without congressional approval? And there's always going to be the standard yes or no, and for the most part, there will always be other stances. And I always click those just to see what they are. I'm going to put no. And just for reference, I pretty much just click most on all of these. But we have been at war for going on 18 years in Afghanistan and 16 years in Iraq. And I myself am an Iraq war veteran. I deployed in 2003, actually on my 19th birthday. But neither of those wars was declared. And Iraq, we haven't declared war since the 40s, since Japan, since Germany, since Italy. I think we also declared war on Hungary, and maybe even Finland. But since that time, we fought wars in Korea. We fought in Vietnam. We had the first Gulf War. There was Grenada. We took out Noriega and Panama. Of course, we've got troops in Afghanistan and Iraq. We've got troops in Niger and Chad, and of course Syria, and most likely several other places. At some point, a country can't be perpetually at war. The mental cost and the physical cost are just staggering. The VA wasn't prepared for the amount of damage that a combined 34 years of constant warfare would do. And I think, and I will admit freely, my stance on the Iraq war has changed. Because I understand that a president does at times need the ability to unilaterally respond without bureaucracy to an event. But there was nothing in Iraq. They didn't attack us. Nothing. That was a war of conquest, which, there's really no beating around the bush on it anymore. And this is something Dwight D. Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex, in his farewell address. And I wish that we would have heeded his warnings, because that is what is driving this constant need to be everywhere around the globe. And it's something we as a society really need to start rethinking. Should the U.S. assassinate suspected terrorists in foreign countries? I'm going to put no. They should be captured and given a fair trial. The U.S. likes to think of itself as a beacon of freedom in the world, a shining city on a hill, as Ronald Reagan once said. But at some point, we have to admit to ourselves we have to live up to that ideal if we're going to claim that, and we fall very far short of that sometimes. If we're torturing people or killing them without due process, we're not a stalwart beacon of freedom there, you know? And in this, well, I'm going to call it a crusade, a lot of innocents have been caught in the middle, hospitals, schools, and it's, I don't know if it's reached a tipping point, but our standing in the world has taken a large hit from it. What is my stance on abortion? I always have a hard time describing this. I'll just put pro-choice. Oh, no, there's a better one. Pro-choice and providing birth control, sex education, social services. Every study shows that the best way to reduce abortions is comprehensive sex education, prenatal care, access to birth control, contraceptives. I mean, look at Texas. They went hardline with abstinence-only sex education, and their STD rates and their teen pregnancy rates, they skyrocketed. And I wish we lived in a society that had no abortions, or as few as possible, but banning them is not... that won't change anything. The numbers are pretty steady since before Roe v. Wade, as they are now. But they're safer now. The only thing banning them would do is force, women who don't want a child into doing it safely in a back alley or an abortion, or in a back alley or a basement somewhere. Sorry. Should the government continue to fund Planned Parenthood? Yes. There's a misconception about Planned Parenthood. A lot of times it's the only prenatal care for low-income women over a large area, and abortions are really a very small part of their business. It's a little crass to use the word business there, but excuse me. And government money can't be used for abortions anyway because of the Hyde Amendment. So, people who say they want to defund Planned Parenthood, they're basically wanting to eliminate the only option some women have. And it's not just women. Men use their services too. They screen for disease, STDs, cancer screens. It's a very valuable organization. Do you support the legalization of same-sex marriage? Yes, with no exceptions. Although I'm assuming it's a little outdated because this has been legal for, 4 years now? 5 years after Obergefell v. Hodges. I mean, I wish that we had legalized it without having to go through the courts. But, at least it happened. Should gay couples have the same adoption rights as straight couples? Yes. I mean, why would you want to deny a kid a loving family? Why would you want to force a kid to spend their life in foster care? So as long as they pass the background checks, let them adopt. Should health insurance providers be required to offer free birth control? Yes, with no exceptions. If your religion says you can't use birth control, well, that applies to you. That you don't have a right to force that on anyone else. Should marital rape be classified and punished as severely as non-marital rape? Yes. Should a business be able to deny service to a customer if the request conflicts with the owner's religious beliefs? No. If you open a business and it's open to the public, I mean, you shouldn't be able to say, no, you can't buy from here. Everyone deserves to be treated equally. Shouldn't end the discrimination laws. Yes, and just protect minorities in general. You know, it's 2019 now, and I know that gets bandied about a lot, but stop being a dick, you know? Treat people with kindness. The world's a dark enough place already. Should the military allow women to serve in combat roles? Yes, as long as they can pass the same tests as men. I never actually served with women, so I have no actual firsthand experience with how they operated. But should businesses be required to have women on their board of directors? No. And I'm going to hope this is the progressive answer. It doesn't matter if you're a man, woman, black, white, whatever. Just pick the most deserving person, the most qualified. Do you support the death penalty? No. Studies have shown that like 4 to 10% of those executed were wrongfully convicted. And an exoneration doesn't really help you out if you've already taken the needle, you know. And I know you're saying, might say 4 to 10%. That doesn't sound like a lot. Well, that's still a lot. That would be 4 people out of 100, or as many as 10 people out of 100. And we have the largest prison population in the world, both overall and per capita. So 4 to 10%, that's a lot of people. Should states be allowed to display the Confederate flag on government property? No. It is a symbol of racism, separatism, and treason. And not only that, they lost. Why would you want to honor people that lost? The Super Bowl's this Sunday. The loser doesn't get a slightly smaller Lombardi trophy, you know. And let's be real for a minute here. All these statues, they went up in response to the Civil Rights Movement. First, in the early 20th century, in response to suffrage, and then later to the growing Civil Rights movements. In fact, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the South Carolina Congress member that excuse me, had the flag, the Confederate flag, flown above the state capitol that was finally taken down, I think 3 years ago. He admitted it was in a response to the Civil Rights Movement to help let people know you need to know your place. We need to grow past that hate at some point. Should terminally ill patients be allowed to end their lives via assisted suicide? Yes. Make sure they know that the choice they're making, that they're cognizant of what they're doing, but no one should suffer if they don't have to. Should universities provide trigger warnings in safe spaces? Yes. I think there are some misconceptions about what these are. A safe space, they don't mean that a student won't be confronted with different ideas or anything like that. It's just college is stressful. Some people need a place they can go to be with like-minded people. And it doesn't have to be because your race is different or you're gay or anything like that. It's just, it might be academic or just some people are just depressed, and it's an acknowledgement that mental health is important and college is stressful. Should the government support a separation of church and state? Yes, we are a secular nation. We have been from the beginning. Thomas Jefferson wrote in the letter to the Danbury Baptists that we have no state religion. The Treaty of Tripoli said we are founded on no specific religion. All the religious iconography on money and statues and monuments, that's in response to the Cold War. The Soviet Union was an atheistic society, which is different than secularism. You can be a secular atheist. An atheist by definition would be secular, but they had a state policy of atheism. Should women be allowed to wear a niqab or face veil to civic ceremonies? Yes. I'll just put yes. It would be a violation of the First Amendment to not let them. Like, if you invited the Pope over, and I live by St. Louis, if you wanted to take him for a stroll through Forest Park, maybe catch a show at the Muni, you wouldn't tell him to take his mitre off his little Pope hat, It's the same principle. Should the government increase environmental regulations to prevent climate change? Yes. Provide more incentives for alternative energy production. And I'm sorry for the coughing and the sniffing. I'm a little congested. Should the U.S. withdraw from the Paris Climate Agreement? See, no, we shouldn't have. That was embarrassing as a nation, so I think this is still a little outdated. Should disposable products such as plastic cups, plates, and cutlery that contain less than 50% biodegradable be banned? I'm going to put yes with a caveat. This is not something that could happen instantaneously. While I am generally a proponent of working fast, I don't like gradualism. That's in policy. In a practical matter, there are probably billions of tons of plastic on the shelves. So I would like to see, after this date, don't produce any more that is not biodegradable, but work in the framework up till that point. Do you support the use of hydraulic fracking to extract oil and natural gas resources? No, not at all. More sustainable energy, please. Should the government give tax credits to the wind industry? Yes. Support more sustainable technologies. Should the government support? No. No thank you to the Dakota Access Pipeline. Ignoring the eminent domain unless it's in response to national security, I am not a fan of eminent domain. And ignoring the fact that it goes through one of the largest aquifers in the United States in Nebraska, and ignoring that we get very little in the way of jobs and money from the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's a Canadian company. It's transporting shale oil to the Gulf of Mexico for export. It leaks. The portion in Canada leaks. And it leaks a lot. So it's not environmentally sound. Should cities be allowed to offer private companies economic incentives to relocate? No. Jeff Bezos is literally the richest human being on the planet, and Amazon is, if I'm not mistaken, the most profitable company on the planet. And New York City is subsidizing their move to their headquarters move there. And I'm sorry for Mr. Bezos going through a divorce. And if I'm not mistaken, his wife will take half his fortune, which not all of it's liquid. A lot of it's in stocks. But still, if you halved his fortune, he would still be, I think he drops from the first to the third richest human being on the planet. We should not be subsidizing that. And the same principle applies for stadiums. Why build I'm a Miami Marlins fan. Yeah, we exist. But that stadium, by the time it's all said and done, will be $1.2 billion taxpayer money. And for what? It's a money drain, and the city will never recoup what they spent on it for a billionaire. Should the U.S. expand offshore oil drilling? No. And I actually am a fan of nationalizing the energy sector. There are energy, in the form of power plants, solar plants, wind turbines. I am a fan of nationalizing that. And there are a few other areas, education, military equipment acquisition, things like that, healthcare and telecommunications, specifically internet. I would nationalize all of those. And I'm going to be real for a minute here. We have to stop telling those that work in the coal industry that their jobs are coming back. It's a lie. More plants have closed under probably the most coal-friendly presidential administration in history than the previous administration they weren't anti-coal, but they weren't exactly coal-friendly either. And it's not regulations doing this. It's renewable energy is cheaper, it's more efficient. Natural gas is cheaper and more efficient. And pretty much every other country admits that, climate change is happening and we're the cause. So coal, as dirty as it is, it just doesn't really have a place anymore. So let's stop lying to these people. Stop telling them their jobs will come back and help them transition into another sector of the energy market. Help them learn how to install or assemble solar panels or wind turbines, desalination plants, because we're kind of in the red zone here, but we're not the ones driving towards the end zone. We're playing defense. I'm sorry for the sports metaphor here, but we don't have a lot of time to rectify what we're doing to the planet. I think the latest IPCC report said 12 years before crunch time's gone, and we have to turn this around at some point. And it's not a United States thing, it's a whole world thing. But we seem to be the only country actively resisting it. Should the government make cuts to public spending in order to reduce the national debt? No. I'm going to put reduce military spending, because we could cut our military budget by about close to 60% and still have the highest military budget in the world. We spend over $800 billion. The next closest is China. And they spend about $600 billion less. Should the U.S. raise taxes on the rich? And I'm just going to say all income brackets, but Um, I would be a fan of that if a stronger social safety net was part of it. Should businesses be required to provide paid leave for full-time employees during the birth of a child? Yes, wholeheartedly. We are one of only two countries, the other being Papua New Guinea, which is an island nation made up of about 800,000 people, a very poor nation. We're one of those two countries that doesn't offer paid maternity leave or paternity leave. And them being relatively poor is, I'm not excusing them either, because literally every other poor country has it. But it just it's exacerbated for us as the richest country on the planet. Should welfare recipients be tested for drugs? No. It's a waste of time and money. That is actually to the point. Every time they've tried this, they spend a ton of money and don't catch anybody. Or you're Rick Scott in Florida who signs this bill into law. Your wife runs a drug testing company and you profit. Good job electing him senator there, Florida. Should the government raise the federal minimum wage? Yes. My specific answer isn't on here, but what I would do is, because $15 an hour countrywide, that's not going to be the right fit for everywhere. And you can go online and find the living wage for every county or municipality in the country. The stats are out there. So what I would do is raise the minimum wage to the living wage per county. And it can't go below a certain threshold. And then peg it to inflation. If it goes up, if the living wage in your county is $12.10, the minimum wage is $12.10. Because the minimum wage has been stagnant for about 40 years now, going on 50. Inflation adjusted, it's actually worth less now than it was in 68. The real money's higher, but the purchasing power is lower. Should employers be required to pay men and women the same salary for the same job? Yes. And this has gotten better. There was a law passed, and there are ways to get around it through the law. You have to give a reason if you're paying a woman less, and the reasoning doesn't have to be great. That's the bad part. But steps have been taken to fix this problem. Should the U.S. raise or lower the tax rate for corporations? I'm going to put raise. But, no. Keep current rates and eliminate deduction. Economists will generally say that a null tax rate for corporations is the best policy. But the United States, we have such a low tax rate for the wealthy with so many loopholes, and we tax capital gains at such a ridiculously low rate. Like, it's capped at 15% if I'm not mistaken. And if you buy some stocks and they depreciate, you can just write that off. So that is why our corporate rate has to be a little bit higher. If they could fix all that other stuff, yeah, of course, lower. Should the government prevent mega mergers? Yes, and break up existing ones. Sinclair Broadcasting buying Tribune Broadcasting's television stations. Verizon merging with, not Verizon, AT&T, DirecTV, Time Warner, and who did Time Warner merge with? Time Warner merged with, can't remember off the top of my head. Comcast, I'm sorry. Comcast. There are places in the country that have no options for uh, internet. Like, um, the average. Have you ever heard of the Faroe Islands? They're a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. They're in either close to or in the Arctic Circle. Not many people live there. Their average internet speed, if I'm not mistaken, is like 14 gigabytes a second. Um, where my parents live, it is one. And they live an hour east of a major metropolitan center in the United States. uh, and the reason that is because there's no competition. And this is why we have, antitrust laws and anti-monopoly laws, and we need to bring those back. A new Sherman Antitrust Act would be, or an updated one would be amazing. Do you support a universal basic income? I want to put yes, for the reason this is laid out here. Nobody should have to live in, certainly on the street in the cold or in the blazing heat, or have to worry about buying food or water or anything like that. I think everybody's basic necessities should be covered. Should there be fewer or more restrictions on current welfare benefits? Fewer. I don't like the catch-all term for welfare. It's kind of become a loaded word to demonize people. And most of the people that get benefits are the elderly or disabled, or they're low-income families wanting to use the WIC program, or get money for low-income families getting money for school lunches, or Medicare recipients. And people are, I don't want to use the exact quote from Lyndon B. Johnson, but paraphrased, it's, if you can convince someone you're better than someone else, it's kind of hard to throw it out there without using the actual quote. It's a strategy to get you to look down on the other in society, to make you think, well, at least you're better than them. And this has been going strong for, that predates LBJ. So, and I'm sorry I bounce around so much in my thoughts here. Didn't script this at all. I'm going completely off the cuff. So if you hear me say something and I'm just completely wrong, don't hesitate to be like, hey, you really dropped the ball on that. Do you believe labor unions help or hurt? They help. I never understood the strong anti-labor, or anti-union sentiment that's developed in this country. Take Denmark, for example. They have no minimum wage law, but a worker at McDonald's makes the equivalent of $16 US because of their strong union. Should the government require businesses to pay salaried employees making up to $46,000 a year, time and a half for overtime hours? Yeah, protect workers' rights more. I don't really get why that's capped at 46,000, but or why they're just wanting to apply it to salaried employees. If you work over a certain amount of time, yeah, you should get overtime money. Should the president offer tax breaks to individual companies to keep jobs in the U.S.? No. Should the government increase the tax rate on profits earned on the sale of stocks, bonds, and yeah, this is the capital gains. It should have the same tax rate as income tax. Should the government add or increase tariffs? No. As you can see, we're currently in a trade war. And this is where I disagree with a lot of other progressives, is I support free trade. I understand some areas are impacted negatively by free trade, but other areas benefit. And I think it is our responsibility to help the areas that are negatively impacted weather it and come out the better. Should the U.S. continue to participate in the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA? Well, technically, this has been supplanted by the U.S., Mexico, Canada Trade Agreement, whatever it's called, but it's basically NAFTA with a few provisions from the TPP thrown in, mostly having to deal with entry into the Canadian dairy market, and not even like saturation entry, just a minor headway into it. I'll put yes. So it's a little outdated. Should the government subsidize farmers? Yes, but only small local farms, not Tyson's Chicken or any other big operation like that. I come from a farming family. My father farms, my uncle, my grandpa did, and going way back. I'm not a farmer myself. I mean, I help out when I can, but the small local farmer, those are the ones that need the help. Should the current estate tax be decreased? No, and increase at a progressive rate. Excuse me. A story actually came out either today or yesterday, late yesterday, that they're wanting to scrap this completely, and it only applies to like 2,000 people in the United States. The super, super wealthy. Should the U.S. increase tariffs on imported products from China? No. Again, trade wars are stupid. Should the Federal Reserve be audited by Congress? Yes. I mean, I think every government organization, even ones I agree with, should be audited. When you handle that much money, you should be regularly audited. Do you favor an increased sales tax in order to reduce property taxes? Yeah, property taxes don't, I agree with this, they don't reflect an owner's ability to pay. But at the same time, a sales taxes are aggressive tax, don't get me wrong. They're paid overwhelmingly, if I'm not mistaken, by people living paycheck to paycheck. But I think a progressive income tax would be the best to make and lower both of those. Should the government use economic stimulus to aid the country during times of recession? See, the last stimulus, it was good for the economy, don't get me wrong, but I think it would have been better served going a check cut to the individuals, let people pay off debt, student loans, credit card debt, car loans, or buy a new car, buy new clothes, or a set of whatever, to put the money back into the economy and lower people's debt. I personally think that would have been the best use for the last stimulus. So I'll just put the tax breaks for all citizens. Should U.S. citizens be allowed to save or invest money in offshore bank accounts? Yes, just report it. Should pension payments be increased for retired government workers? Yes, adjust for cost of living. Should pension plans, for federal, state, and local government workers be? No. I hate the word privatization. Don't privatize anything. Should an in-state sales tax apply to online purchases of in-state buyers? Yes. Do you support the TPP? Yes, I did. And I would like to see it be renegotiated at some point. Again, and this is where I break with a lot of progressives, because I do support trade deals. Should the government classify Bitcoin as... No. I will say it is a commodity in its own way. I think of one single Bitcoin, and that's not the only one. There's also like Dogecoin, or I can't think of any others off the top of my head. A single Bitcoin was worth like 16,000 real dollars. So some regulation there does need to come into play. Should internet service providers be This is something I talked about earlier. Why would you want tiered internet? Think to yourself right now, do you like your cable service? Do you like your satellite service? All right, now imagine excuse me. Now imagine paying extra if you want to watch Netflix or play a game of Overwatch with your buddies or watch YouTube, anything like that. I like both of these answers here. They both apply. I criticize Barack Obama a lot. I don't think he was infallible. I think he was a good president, but definitely not infallible. He is the reason he put Ajit Pai in his stupid giant Reese's cup in a position to where he could rise to even more power, and that is one of Obama's biggest faults as far as I'm concerned. Should there be more restrictions on the current process of purchasing a gun? I think we need stronger background checks, close the loopholes, like gun show loopholes, which some places have been doing. And if we're going to live in a society where people think a firearm has more rights than a human, so to speak, might as well train people to use them safely. Are you in favor of decriminalizing drug use? Yes. And if you're in jail for pot, just let him go. Let him go. Let him go. Sorry, I should never sing. Do you support affirmative action programs? Yes, I do. Should teachers? No. No. Should local police increase surveillance and patrol of Muslims? No. Why? Right. I'm just shaking my head because I know there are people that would agree with that whole. There are people that don't want a Muslim person to live in the United States at all. I mean, look at the reaction to Rashida Tlaib saying "mf'er," in the same week that Steve King went on a racist diatribe in an interview. Which one did you hear about more? That tells you all you need to know. Should there be term? No. I would like to see an upper limit of how long you can serve. Like mandatory retirement at 16. If you turn 65 before your term starts, or in the middle of your term, I'm sorry, I think you should be allowed to finish your term. But I would make 65 the hard cutoff. Mandatory retirement. Should people on the no-fly list be banned from purchasing guns and ammunition? Some people get on that list just for having similar names, so I'm going to put no because that's kind of a slippery slope. Well, hey, look, slippery slope. Right as I said it. Should it be illegal to burn the American flag? No. Free speech. Should the NSA, National Security Agency, be allowed to collect? No. Not without a warrant. If you ever get a chance to watch, there's an episode of Last Week Tonight where John Oliver goes into surveillance. It's been a while since I've watched it, but it actually ends up with him going to Russia to talk to Edward Snowden. And it's fast. I know John Oliver's not for everybody, but that is a very good segment. And I highly recommend it. Should the government regulate social media? No. Let's see here. No, the government should not determine what is fake or real news. Do you want the current administration with a president that statistically lies like 18 times a day or makes 18 false statements? Do you want them deciding what's real or fake news? No. Should victims of gun violence be allowed to sue firearm dealers and manufacturers? No. Dealers would be a stronger case than the manufacturers. Because you could make a case that a dealer fudges paperwork or something and lets someone that shouldn't have a weapon get one. And I think this is the part of the Second Amendment that debate that gets left out. You can support the Second Amendment, but still realize that there are some people that don't need to have weapons, and there are some weapons that people don't need to have. I wish that was the tone of the debate, and I think you could actually form a dialogue there. Should the redrawing of congressional districts be controlled by an independent, nonpartisan commission? Yes. Should the government... No. It's about private property, eminent domain. Hate eminent domain. Do you support the Patriot Act? No. Obama should have got rid of the damn thing. I mean, I'm a boring person, don't get me wrong. There's probably someone watching me take this quiz right now as I do it, looking at every answer I click. Or they're looking through my phone and looking at all the pictures or videos I have on there, going through my website. So they're going to see that I like talking about football or soccer and wrestling on Reddit. But there are other people that, you know, that aren't quite as boring as I am. Should the government raise the retirement age for Social Security? No. Should the government pass laws which protect whistleblowers? Yes. Actually, going back to the Edward Snowden thing. Should the U.S. Hey, next question. Should the U.S. government grant immunity to Edward Snowden? Yes. How's that for some irony? Should the military upgrade Air Force One? I mean, the Boeing, it's based on a 747. I'm not sure what the actual nomenclature of the Air Force One plane is. But the 747 is an aging airframe. I don't really know what you could upgrade it with. So I'll put the current fleet as what I would rather this question be is, do you think the entourage the president travels with is a little on the extreme side? Which I personally think it is. They take 5, if I'm not mistaken, Blackhawks. They have a different designation, but I think they're VH-60L Blackhawks. And they fly in zigzag formation, so you don't know which one the president's on. They take multiple cars with decoy cars with up-armored Cadillacs and chase cars, and there's police escorts, and it seems a little excessive to me, because, I mean, yes, the president of the United States, but is he really that much important, he or she, someday? That much more important than any other world leader? I mean, I personally don't think so. I mean, look at it in a vacuum. Like if the leader of Botswana came to the United States and they travel with a similar entourage, we would be like, what's this guy all about, you know? Should health insurers be allowed to deny coverage? No. Should the government regulate? Yes. Should the government increase funding from? Yes. I'm not a Ronald Reagan fan. I am not shy about that in any way, shape, or form. But this is one of the main reasons why. He did a lot of damage to the mental health infrastructure in the United States. Yes. Let the pot smokers out. I don't smoke it myself. I hate the smell. Sorry for those that enjoy it, but I mean, let them out of jail. Yes. If we could copy the NHS in the United Kingdom, that would be fantastic. Yes. But I prefer switching to a single payer system. Should cities open drug safe havens? Yes. And treat it as a mental health issue. Stop throwing them in prison. Should people? No, they shouldn't be. Most people that. The question is, should people be required to work in order to receive Medicaid? No. For starters, most people that are receiving benefits, the vast majority are working. And the vast majority of those that aren't working and receiving benefits are elderly or disabled. Should the federal government be allowed to negotiate drug prices for Medicare? Yes. Should there be more or less? And if you had a universal single payer system, you wouldn't have to worry about the VA. Do you support the ACA? Yes, but a mandatory single payer system would be even better. Do you support increasing taxes for the rich in order to reduce interest rates for student loans? Yes, and everyone deserves to go to college. Do you support Common Core? This is kind of where I was going back with the federalization of the education. Finland doesn't allow, and they have the highest rank. Do you support Common Core national standards? Yes. And this is kind of going back to what I was discussing earlier. Finland, it doesn't allow private schools. Government public education, government-funded public education is mandatory, and they have the highest rated education system on the planet. And this is what I was saying. I would federalize the education system in this country. There would be no private schools. There would be no religious schools. There wouldn't be any homeschooling. There wouldn't be definitely no charter schools, which it looks like is the next question here. There would be a national framework, mandatory classes in math, English, science, and there would be standardized and evidence-based learning. When I say that, I mean things we know work. Do you support charter schools? No. Again, I hate privatization. Should the U.S. remain in the United Nations? Yes. Should every 18-year-old citizen be required to provide at least 1 year of military service? No. Should the U.S. accept refugees from Syria? Yes. And our background check system and vetting process for refugees is ridiculous and thorough, and some might even say invasive. But that's by necessity, and you go through checks through the Department of Defense, the FBI. I think, if I'm not mistaken, the CIA gets involved. And those coming from Syria go through an even more extensive process. It can take 2 to 3 years before you're even put on the list to possibly become a refugee. Should the military be allowed to use... I got ahead of myself. Should the military be allowed to use enhanced interrogation techniques such as waterboarding to gain information from suspected terrorists? No. And see, this is kind of what I was saying earlier. There's more than one right answer. Torture doesn't tell you anything. 24 is not real life. I haven't got around to reading it yet. I want to read the Select Committee report on torture. But then this also goes back to where I was saying we can't call ourselves the beacon of freedom when we're doing things like this. Should the government increase or decrease military spending? No, like I said, we could cut it in half or more and still spend more on our military than any other country. Should the U.S. continue to support Israel? No. Well, yes and no. We should not favor them or Palestine over the other. The situation there is FUBAR.